Jiro here from Umbra Games with a review of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, exclusively for Nintendo Switch. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was released in December of 2017 and seems to be more of a sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles released on Wii in the US in 2012 and 3DS in 2015, rather than the Xenoblade Chronicles X that was released on Wii U in 2015. While there's no immediate apparent character or universe overlaps, the game is more focused on characters with lengthy cutscenes where X felt like the world you were exploring and discovering was the central theme. All games in the series have strong themes of creation, the universe, and deities, which I won't go into much here since my X review touched a bit more deeply on it, so check out the channel for more info there. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 falls into what I call the auto attack or real-time RPG, where you target an enemy and tell your party to attack and they will perform swings based on weapon speed to eliminate foes. XC2 keeps the MMO RPG feel of world exploration, where some enemies will attack you if they hear or see you, known as aggroing in the MMO world. Not all enemies are aggressive, and Xenoblade 2 actually has no visual cues to let you know which ones will or won't. You can keep running to try and outrun the enemies, or move to ground that serves as a better vantage point for your battle before you engage. The Xenoblade games also sprinkle super high-level enemies that roam the land where getting aggroed means certain death, forcing you to watch your environment at all times. Combat reaches greater depths in this entry, keeping the core mechanics of previous games, but adding some additional layers, further exemplified by tutorials still popping up even around hour 15 or so. One of the key differences is the cooperation between the characters you control, called drivers, and the weapon beings they wield, known as blades. Drivers obtain core crystals, and when they bond with said crystals, a being materializes bearing a specific weapon and element. Weapons range from swords to spears to claws to orbs, and elements are the traditional fire, water, ice, wind, lightning, earth, light, and dark. You can almost think of these blades as almost sort of Pokemon, except driver arts are dependent on the weapon type, and blade arts seem to not really differentiate much within an element other than its power level. All weapons have 3 phases of auto attack. Think of it like a combo that continues on until an enemy blocks or until you move your driver. Each step of the combo increases in power. As your driver continues to auto attack, you'll notice the border of the icons in the lower right filling up. When they fully encapsulate the icon, you can use that art in combat. Arts can have various bonuses based on your position, front or side facing or back attack, so balancing what art is ready with what phase of a combo you're in can really change up your timing. Now, you can cancel an attack by using that art, and when you do this it'll fill up the rightmost icon in the lower right, and this is your Blade's art. When you trigger a Blade art, they'll launch their elemental ability at the target. This action will then trigger a Blade combo where other party members can move along the track in the upper right to trigger more and more powerful abilities. The first person to trigger must have their ability at least level 1, but can be greater. The second in the series must be 2 or greater, and as you can guess, the third 3 or higher. You eventually reach a point in the story where most of your drivers can equip up to 3 different blades, giving multiple elements at your disposal at a time. Since you technically only control one driver at a time, switched from the menu, you'll instead use ZR or ZL when the icon shows up, where you give your party members the command to unleash their blade art. Now, to further complicate things, when you hit that 3rd level attack, you'll put an elemental orb on the enemy of whichever element the last attack was. If you take note of the party gauge in the upper left, each segment allows you to revive a party member if they fall, but if you fill up all 3 segments, you can start a chain attack in a stop-motion QuickTime event fashion where you can choose a blade to make an attack. For every orb you have around an enemy, if you can break it with the hits from any element except the one it is, you get an additional round to add to the chain attack. Now this becomes really crucial on some of the harder bosses and creatures, as one time I got 4 orbs around it, and when I started the chain attack, ended up doing damage in the millions. Now, I realize all that can sound a little overwhelming, but the game does feed it to you piece by piece to make it a little bit more digestible. Now, Xenoblade 2 does focus on each battle, rather than some RPGs that focus on the dungeon crawl endurance, as your character's HP will fill up after every encounter. Combat does seem a little slower paced in this entry to my recollection, which can make some battles with enemies of equal or greater levels seem to take quite a long time. I don't know that I ever got bored though, constantly focusing on timing and which elemental chain to produce. I will say, when attempting the quest, I would often run and ignore battles unless foes were sitting on a collection point or I was forced to fight. If I needed to level, I'd often just go into the wilds with the intent to grind, not mixing progression with fighting very often. Now, in addition to the weapons and elements, blades also have a class, going with the traditional MMO trinity: attack, tank, and healer. Tanks generate more enmity or aggro or hate or whatever you want to call it, making the enemy focus on them. Healers generally have one art that heals, but Rex, your main character, also has an art with Pyra that, when used, generates health potions that can be grabbed for life. Most tanks have a shield move to make them invulnerable for seconds at a time, and some attack classes have moves that sacrifice HP for harder hits. It's important to keep your drivers balanced, as you'll most likely always want someone with tank blades and someone with healers. The AI is actually fairly decent. I think during the 70 hours I spent with the game, I only yelled at my characters once or twice. Now, your drivers have two different leveling mechanisms. The first is character related, where you gain skill points for finishing quests and killing enemies. These points can be spent on nodes that boost various stats, or make arts mapped to specific buttons available immediately when starting a battle, etc. In addition, your drivers also get weapon points for every type of blade that's bonded to them, where they can boost the power of the arts connected with it. Each blade has 4 arts, and you can have 3 of those equipped at any given time. Now, each blade also has an affinity chart, each node having specific criteria to activate its bonus. Sometimes it's killing a specific enemy type, giving them an item they like, or using a tier of their blade art a specific number of times. Most blades open up the 5 tiers through character usage, a stat called Trust. As you progress through your journey, you can use rare and legendary core crystals, as well as some provided through plot points, to awaken rare blades that can have varying ways to open the tiers. There is a blade album to track the rare ones you've found, but most of the time you'll just awaken generic-looking males, females, or beast-like ones. Now, there are several interactive traversal points and objects that can be activated by having the right combination of skill nodes amongst your current party blades. I found this part to be a bit agonizing, especially late game where some of the stat requirements are super high, and if you weren't lucky enough to bond new blades that even have the presence of the Fortify skill on their tree or lockpicking, then you're out of luck. I don't have a final count on how many stats there are, but I'm going to say there's probably 30, and each blade can only have 1 or 2. There are 2 or 3 points where progression on main quests requires you have blades versed in those skills too. Now, in addition to the affinity charts, there are weapon chips that you can equip on your blades that once placed kind of are gone forever, but will increase their battle stats. There are also auxiliary cores you can activate by finding them in chests or as enemy drops, gathering resources from sparkly points all over the map, and taking those to a vendor to combine. I tried to pay attention to some of these cores, but I finally realized they were so specialized, like boosting accuracy 20% during daytime, or doing 20% more damage to an insect enemy type, that overall they sort of became inconsequential for the main game, which was a bit disappointing. Not to mention, each one required specific resources from all over the world, and without some sort of in-game tracker on what came from where, it became overwhelming to find them without looking them up online. Imagine if you're going with some of the harder optional content in the game, those cores may have a bigger place though. The final type of gear is accessories for the drivers. These provide minor modifications to various stats, resistances, or attack powers. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 keeps the huge feeling open world of its predecessors. They nailed the draw distances once again, and since nearly all landmasses in this game reside on the backs or internals of giant creatures called Titans, being able to look up and seeing that beast swim through what's known as the Cloud Sea is actually pretty amazing. This is another game, though, that really makes me sad that the Switch isn't up to current generation standards, because seeing some of these marvels in a machine that could process things faster and better would be even better than the muddy textures and pop-in and occasional frame rate drops we get from the technologically weaker Switch. You can fast travel to any of the major locations spread across the map, even jumping from land to land, as long as you're not in battle. Each Titan has a development stat rated from 1 to 5 stars. As this rating increases, vendors will offer discounted prices and greater selection of goods. Development is gained by talking to citizens, performing the game's side quests, and buying and selling goods to some of its vendors. Now, you can set 1 active quest at a time, with blue marking side quests and pink icons marking main quests. By making it active, you'll set an icon on the compass, which may be the worst compass I've ever seen. And by following it, I may have gotten lost more than if I'd just taken a shot in the dark in the first place. In fact, a lot of the game's maps themselves actually got stuck trying to figure out how to progress with the ups and downs of the natural terrain. You can click in the stick to see a small map in the corner, or even blow it out huge Diablo style, but it still only lets you see 1 zoomed in portion at a time. There are several types of vendors found in the towns, the weapon chips and core vendors being the more important that I mentioned, but you can also buy what are called pouch items from art vendors, game vendors, veggie vendors, etc. These items, when used by a driver, will provide temporary bonuses to that specific driver and their blades. One other vendor type is the cylinder vendor. Rex, the main character in Xenoblade 2, is what's known as a salvager, diving into the sea from various access points using an oxygen tank and retrieving items found from unknown previous civilizations. Each dive requires a cylinder, which can be obtained in various rarities that yield different tiers of treasure. There's a quick time event accompanying each dive, but honestly, the results seemed a bit random from that, because even 3 excellent clicks would sometimes summon enemies as well as treasure, and sometimes 1 or 2 excellents could present a greater yield than hitting all 3. Now you can turn sets of this treasure into various recycling vendors. This is another place the game sort of fell down for me. Each of the vendors in the different towns across the different land masses want different combinations of this trash. Figuring out what came from where without keeping extensive notes is kind of a lost cause. If I needed some extra cash, I'd just stay in one zone and do several dives, sell what I could, and then move on. Now, one final mechanic I'll touch on is the mercenary group you create several hours in. You can send blades that aren't currently equipped on timed missions for gold, experience, and skill points, and some missions once completed even enable vendors in the region to carry more products. These missions also have requirements, be it elements, blade genders, or specific stats, and the time it takes for them to return can be reduced if they have skill nodes activated that are appropriate to it. Now, I'm not sure if there's a name for this type of minigame, but we've seen something similar most recently in games like Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. One change Xenoblade Chronicles 2 used was a slightly more anime aesthetic and personality. Some of the troped expressions and blushing, even to a level of girls in the hot tub scene, are here, and your main characters all have that style of animation. I personally don't take issue with this, but it does feel like a departure from previous titles and ends up making it feel a little closer to Bandai Namco's Tales series than the Xenoblade Chronicles. The main party of characters all had fairly deep motivations and personalities, and the plot had a decent number of twists and discoveries. Unfortunately, their yells and battle cries didn't differ enough, with like 1 or 2 variations per person, which they would yell every battle. My least favorite RPG trope is here again too, with intense boss battles where you end victoriously by depleting the enemy's full HP bar, only to lose to them in a follow-up cutscene where they or you end up escaping to fight them again another day. There were a few nonsensical points as well, where characters flip-flopped on decisions and actions a little too easily, but like I said, overall it was pretty entertaining. One thing I found slightly disturbing quite a ways in was a comment one character makes to another about a driver marrying their blade. Guess this could push further into the meaning and perception of life that the series often likes to touch, but blades can be summoned or dismissed at the drop of a hat, and a blade doesn't remember anything from the last time it was instantiated. They never seem to really delve into this point too deeply, but there is an awkward moment where the character Tora reveals a closet full of various abdomens for his fake blade Poppy. I mean, there are just so many implications this driver-blade relationship could make that wouldn't occur if they were simple beasts like Pokemon, and I can't tell if I'm disappointed or relieved they didn't bring more of this to the surface. I did find a lot of the musical score extremely catchy. I ended up doing a little research and found that Yasunori Matsuda is credited as the composer, who's also responsible for games in the Chrono and Shadow Hearts series. Good stuff. I did start off completing nearly every quest I could find and focused on getting one specific region leveled up, doing most of my buying and selling there where applicable to see how much effort it would take. In 70 hours, I never got a single region to 5 stars. Side quests appeared seemingly randomly, or I guess really just in a way where if you were going for 100% completion, I'm not sure you'd ever know if you got there. There are named creatures wandering in the wilds that when slain will produce a tombstone that you can bring them back to fight them again if you wish, that would drop rare items, but again, nothing to track the progression like a hunting log or some such. I guess in this way it's a bit more reflective of an MMO style game, but I am one that likes my checklists and progression percentages. Needless to say though, if you're into JRPGs, you own a Switch, and you're looking for a game with a ton of content, this one could be right up your alley. With an interesting, slightly slower paced but complex battle system, a decent-sized world that feels larger than life, an interesting cast of characters with tons of combat customizations, a slew of side quests and optional content including hunts and blade collection, an entertaining story with a lot of pretty extensive cutscenes, and tons of systems and mechanics to level up and dive into, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a pretty great modern-day JRPG. Rated as an auto-attack JRPG, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 hits a 78 out of 100 on a true 1 to 100 scale. This is Chiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. As always, please feel free to subscribe to the channel for notifications of more videos, or follow me on Twitter @Umbra Games.